What if the most honest confession of the new year wasn't a love announcement, not a career milestone, but a simple sentence? I don't like being watched. That was all it took. No scandal, no controversy by design. Yet the reaction was immediate: surprise, debate, even mockery. Because the person who said it was Wang Yibo, one of the most visible figures in Chinese entertainment today. And suddenly, the question was no longer about him. It was about us. For many people, the spotlight represents success, recognition, and arrival. It is imagined as the ultimate reward, proof that one has been seen, chosen, and valued. Yet there comes a moment when visibility no longer feels like affirmation, but exposure. In this story, Wang Yibo quietly reveals that moment. What once energized him now drains him. What once symbolized achievement now feels intrusive. This shift does not happen overnight. It accumulates slowly through years of being observed, interpreted, and projected upon. When every glance becomes a judgment and every appearance becomes an expectation, the spotlight loses its warmth. This is not ingratitude. It is fatigue. The human nervous system is not designed to remain constantly alert, constantly visible. When rest becomes conditional and privacy becomes rare, even success can feel heavy. This part of the story asks us to reconsider a simple assumption that being seen is always desirable. Sometimes the greatest luxury is not more attention, but the freedom to step out of it, even briefly, and return to oneself. The confession immediately triggers a moral tension. Some listeners hear honesty, a rare admission of discomfort in a world that rewards performance. Others hear privilege, a complaint voiced from a position of undeniable advantage. The question emerges almost instinctively. If you benefit from fame, do you forfeit the right to dislike it? This conflict reveals less about the speaker and more about collective expectations. Society often treats success as a contract: visibility in exchange for silence, reward in exchange for emotional restraint. Gratitude is expected to be permanent, and discomfort is permitted only for those who struggle visibly. But emotional truth does not obey social hierarchies. Privilege does not erase vulnerability. It simply changes its shape. To dismiss discomfort because it comes from someone successful is to reduce human experience to a transaction. This part of the narrative does not demand agreement. Instead, it invites reflection. It asks whether honesty must be morally pure to be valid, or whether it can simply be human. Imperfect, complicated, and sometimes inconvenient to hear. There is a cost to constant readiness, a quiet one, rarely discussed. Being on does not only mean performing on stage or in front of cameras. It means remaining emotionally accessible, socially appropriate, and psychologically guarded at all times. Over months and years, this state becomes exhausting. The mind never fully relaxes when it expects interruption. The body never truly rests when it anticipates scrutiny. What appears effortless from the outside often requires immense internal control. Eventually, enthusiasm gives way to maintenance, and passion is replaced by discipline. This exhaustion does not announce itself dramatically. It arrives as a preference for silence, a withdrawal from crowds, a longing for stillness. These are not signs of rejection, but signals of self-preservation. In this context, the confession feels less like a complaint and more like a boundary. It acknowledges that constant engagement is not neutral, it consumes. And when rest is postponed for too long, even the strongest motivation begins to thin. In highly social environments, warmth is often mistaken for virtue and restraint for deficiency. Silence becomes suspicious. Distance is read as arrogance. Yet not all personalities are designed for constant emotional exchange. Some survive through containment rather than expression. What has often been labelled as coldness may, in fact, be a form of control, a way to protect inner stability amid relentless noise. In an industry that demands availability, choosing restraint can be a deliberate act of self-regulation. This perspective challenges a long-standing bias, that emotional openness must always be visible to be genuine. In reality, some individuals conserve emotion in order to function. They speak less, but feel no less deeply. Reframing reserved behavior as intentional rather than defective allows space for different emotional architectures. It suggests that strength does not always look expressive. Sometimes it looks quiet, firm, contained, and unyielding in its need for inner balance. This moment subtly exposes two distinct philosophies of survival within the same industry. One path relies on visibility, constant engagement, social fluency, presence across platforms. It rewards adaptability and emotional display. It is outward-facing, relational, and often loud. The other path is narrower and lonelier. It prioritizes craft over conversation, boundaries over accessibility, and endurance over popularity. Progress is measured through work rather than presence. Validation arrives slowly, if at all. Neither path guarantees peace. Both require sacrifice. But recognizing that more than one path exists is crucial. It dismantles the illusion that success demands uniform behavior. By simply existing differently, this alternative approach expands the definition of legitimacy within the industry. It offers a quiet reassurance to those who do not thrive in constant visibility. Excellence does not require imitation. There is room for divergence, even at the highest levels. The story resonated not because it was dramatic, but because it was recognizable. Beneath the fame lies a sentiment many understand. The fatigue of being observed, evaluated, and expected to perform a version of oneself that feels sustainable only temporarily. Viewers did not connect to status, they connected to sensation, the desire to retreat after prolonged interaction, the relief of solitude, the quiet guilt that accompanies the need for space. This is why the conversation extended beyond fandom. It echoed the lived experience of modern life. Workplaces that reward extroversion, digital environments that encourage constant presence, and social norms that confuse availability with worth. In this sense, the confession became a mirror. It reflected a shared condition rather than an individual problem. And mirrors, when held still long enough, tend to draw people closer. At the beginning of a new year, courage is often associated with ambition. Doing more, striving harder, expanding further. Yet this moment offers a quieter definition. Courage, here, is the willingness to acknowledge limits without dramatics or defense. To admit discomfort in a culture that equates success with satisfaction is risky. It invites misunderstanding, judgment, and simplification. Yet, it also creates space for honesty. Not only for oneself, but for others who feel similarly constrained. This confession does not reject achievement. It reframes it. It suggests that growth may sometimes involve contraction, and strength may involve withdrawal. In a world that praises constant expansion, choosing self-awareness is a radical act. Perhaps that is why this moment lingers. Not because it was loud, but because it was restrained. Not because it demanded agreement, but because it invited reflection. And sometimes that is the bravest place to begin. Perhaps the real question isn't whether Wang Yibo was right or wrong. Perhaps it's this: when did being honest about personal limits become something we mock instead of understand? If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel understood, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Your support helps this space remain thoughtful, calm, and real. See you in the next video.